It's pretty great. So I'd like to thank everybody who's joining us today and spending your morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you may be with us. My name is Sarah Reeves and I'm the marketing manager for New Society Publishers. We would like to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from the unceded traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations and that we're welcoming attendees from a wide range of territories. This last year has been a challenge on a variety of levels, but it's also brought lessons of community building, resilience, self-sufficiency, food security, and equity and diversity to the forefront. New Society Publishers remains committed to bringing you books that offer positive solutions for troubled times. So over the next couple of months, we are offering virtual events focusing on food and gardening. Our next event is May 13th with Blake Cothran, author of Pawpaws, a complete growing and marketing guide. So if you'd like to learn how to diversify your orchard or food forest with pawpaws, please be sure to join us. And we're going to put the link to that event in the chat so you can register with us for that. Also, if you'd like to stay up to date with our upcoming events, our sales, new books, please sign up for our newsletter. And again, we'll include that link in the chat, both on Facebook and in the Zoom. And we would like this virtual experience to be as interactive as possible. So we appreciate everybody commenting and chatting with each other. And please post your questions that you have as we go along in the chat. And Bevin is going to answer as many of them as he can at the end of the talk. At the end, we're also going to choose one of the posted questions in our chat section to be our winning question, and you will win a copy of the Artisan Herbalist. So be sure to participate for your chance to win. And as well, one of our attendees will be randomly selected to win a subscription to Harrowsmith, Canada's premier magazine on everything rural, organic, and green. And finally, we invite you to enjoy a 25% discount on Bevin's book, The Artisan Herbalist, using the code BEVIN, B-E-V-I-N 25 at checkout, and that will get you a 25% discount on his book. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Bevin. Bevin is an author, herbalist, gardener, seed saver, and educator. He is the owner of Small House Farm, a sustainable herb farm in central Michigan, offering a full line of herbal wellness products crafted from herbs that are grown or gathered from the wild, and oils that are cold pressed at the homestead. Cohen offers workshops and lectures nationwide on the benefits of living closer to the land through seeds, herbs, and locally grown food. And he is the author of From Our Seeds and Their Keepers and Saving Our Seeds, as well as the Artisan Herbalist. He serves on the boards of the International Herb Association, the Slow Food Arc of Taste Seed Bank, and the Advisory Council for the Community Seed Network, and lives in Sanford, Michigan. So welcome, Bevin.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to spend this time with you and all of our virtual friends from around the world. Like you'd mentioned, the difficulties of COVID, these challenges that we face, they are difficult, but truly through all challenges, we find opportunities. And this platform that we have now where we can all get together no matter where we're at, no matter what time of the day it may be, we can gather together to learn from each other, to build community, to share some ideas. That's really, really exciting stuff. And I'm just really honored to have this opportunity to chat with everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and we can get started. So today we're going to talk about making teas, tinctures, and oils at home. And I'm going to say a lot of things, folks. I have a lot of information that I want to share with you in a limited amount of time. So we're going to get right into it right away. I'll tell you briefly about myself. I'm from a small house farm, like Sarah mentioned. And I like to show a picture of the house just right off the bat because it's not really a small house like you might think from the internet. I don't live in a tiny house by any means, although many people seem to think that from the name of the business. Small house really represents more of our philosophy, a smaller, more intentional, slower way of life. It's a regular sized home, as you can see. It's like 1,200 square feet, plenty of space for everybody. Although I do have 2 boys and they keep getting bigger and the house stays the same size, and we'll see how that plays out in the long run. But for now, it's nice and cozy for everybody. We're on the end of a dirt road, a dead-end dirt road across the street from about 1,100 acres of forest, which gives me the opportunity to forage for my food as well as our medicine. So that's quite a blessing. We grow a majority of our food on site, as well as herbs that we craft for home use, as well as for commercial use. This is kind of my 9 to 5 gig, I suppose, here is, like Sarah mentioned, we cold press oil from various seeds and nuts. As you can see here, it's what do we got pictured here? Sunflower and hemp seed oil are a couple of the ones that we press. And then with these oils, as well as herbs that we either cultivate or forage for, we craft a wide variety of wellness and beauty products. As you can see pictured here, some of our best sellers, I guess. So that's kind of what brings me to the table today. That's my experience and knowledge. That's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit, is how to incorporate these kind of ideas and these products into your day-to-day life. First thing I'm going to suggest, folks, is to get yourself a notebook and a pen, or be prepared to take some screenshots or photographs of your computer screen, because I'm going to share just a wealth of information, like I said, in a very limited amount of time. So there's a lot of stuff coming your way. And this notebook is going to be handy. We're going to actually talk about this notebook a lot. So actually get a notebook and a pen if you don't have one. And I want you to take some notes of what we're going to say. And there's just going to be so much coming. So let's get ready. First off, when we talk about herbs, I'm going to be speaking about leaves, flowers, seeds, bark, and roots. These are all the different parts of the plants that we're going to be working with. But from a culinary standpoint, when we define herbs, we actually are only talking about things like leaves and flowers, the aerial portions of the plant, the tender, soft green things, whereas seeds, bark, and roots fall into the category of spice. But for the sake of what we're doing here today, I'm lumping everything together under the term herbs, and we're going to talk about all of that, because we're going to talk about these different parts of a number of different plants. We're going to start with these different vehicles, venues, if you will, for how we harness the power of these plants, different ways to use herbs. And then the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about specific plants and their uses. So we're going to tackle this idea from 2 different directions, and then hopefully we got some time at the end for a little bit of Q&A. First, we'll talk about water infusion. When we think about herbs, this tends to be where our mind wanders first. This is the most common. As you can see, even here, I've got my cup of tea today. When we think about herbalism, we think about water infusions, right? And what a water infusion is we're using the hot water to extract the water-soluble chemicals from the plant material. Think about when you brew a cup of tea, right? Herbs in your teacup, usually about a tablespoon of dried herbs for every 6 to 8 ounces of water. You pour the water over the herb, and it begins to extract the aromas and the colors of the plant end up in your tea, right? This is how we know that these chemicals are being extracted from the plant material. We're creating an infusion is what we're doing. Now, certainly the most common is the tea, but we can make water infusions for other things as well too. Tea is a delicious beverage, certainly, but what if we wanted to make a water infusion for something a little more medicinal? We're going to do something a little bit more potent. To make our infusion more potent, there's 2 ways that we can go about that. 1, using more herbs, right? And 2, steeping it for a longer period of time, right? So here's a folk method for doing that sort of thing. We're going to get ourselves a mason jar. We use a lot of mason jars, different kind of containers, whatever you may have. Get yourself a mason jar, load it up with the herbs that you have. I like to use dried herbs, simply because the water has evaporated out of the plant material. If you're using fresh herbs, there's a lot more water content in that plant material. Therefore, you're going to need to use significantly more, 2 to 3 times as much plant material if you're working with fresh. So you're going to put your herbs into your jar, and then you're going to load it up with water. Now, let's say, we're using this cup here. Let's say I'm going to fill my herbs up to this point. You're going to fill your water up about 2 fingers past that, right? So making sure that all of the herb is properly submerged under the water. You're going to cap it off, label it. Labeling is key to successful herbalism. You're going to put the name of the plant as well as the date right on there, and you're going to put it in your refrigerator to steep overnight. Now that's going to give you a strong, potent infusion. That's not necessarily just for drinking, but also topically. We use it as a wash for your skin, for different skin conditions, or in your hair as a hair wash. There's a number of different ways that we can utilize these water infusions. We're going to get into that in more depth as we go, but let's keep moving along on these ideas here. Now let's talk about an infused oil. An infused oil is when we use fat, the oil itself, the fat, to extract the fat-soluble chemicals from the plant material. Now, some chemical constituents in our plant are water-soluble, but even more of them are fat-soluble. So these tend to be stronger medicinals, right? So we're going to take our mason jar again, and we're going to load it with our herbs, dried herbs. It's very important when we're making infused oils that we use dried herbs. The water content in fresh herbs, water and oil don't mix, right? And that's going to create an environment suitable for the growth of bacteria, mold, and those sorts of things. We do not want that to happen. We want to make sure we're working with dry plant material. Load it into our jar. And again, 2 fingers past. Here's your herbs. 2 fingers deep into that is the level of your oil that you want to fill it into. We want to make sure that that plant material stays submerged below the level of the oil out of the oxygen, right? Label it. Again, the name of the plant. I like to use what kind of oil that I'm using, as well as the date that I've created, and put it away in a cool, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks is how much time it's going to take to properly extract the chemical constituents via fat from the plant material. Now, if you need to, you can leave this longer than 6 weeks, certainly, as long as the plant material is below the level of the oil, so it's not exposed to the air. That's perfectly fine. But after 6 weeks, it's not going to get any more potent, right? It's fully extracted everything that it can, but it will certainly store if life gets busy and you need to let it sit a little bit longer. Now, once we have these infused oils, we can make a number of different products with them: salves, lotions, balms, and all these are going to be determined by the ratio of beeswax that we use. But hold on, let's break it down step by step. Let's say we're going to make an herbal salve, right? Now in the jar here on the left is my herb infused oil. It is already set in a cool, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks, and now I'm ready to make my product with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is filter out the herbs, right? You can use a coffee filter, a different screen or whatever. I'm using here in this picture on the right is the greatest tool. It's from a brew supply house, and it's essentially it's a very large plastic funnel, and inside of the funnel is a fine mesh screen, so I can easily filter off all of my stuff. That screen pops right out. Take it and wash it. Really, really cool tool. I use it all the time, right? Whatever tool you have, that's what you're going to want to use. Filter out all that plant material until you just have a container with your herb infused oil, no plant material in it. Now, we've squeezed out all of the oil from these herbs here. I'm using a very fancy tool in this photo here, as you can see, my potato masher. But if you're using coffee filters or a cheesecloth or something like that, you can simply just pick it up and wring it out by hand. You just want to squeeze all that goodness out of there. Don't waste any of that good stuff. Squeeze all the drops of oil out of your plant material. Then we have to weigh our beeswax. That's the next step here. So what we're doing here when we create these products is we're essentially using beeswax to make these oils portable, to give them a slightly different form. And I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do this, right? Not because I don't want you to know, but because everybody's going to do things a little bit differently. And I want what you learn from me and what you learn from my book, The Artisan Herbalist, to be the starting point for where you're going to go on your herbal journey, right? But I'll give you a place to leap off from, right? Now, when we make our ratios, we have to think about a ratio based on volume to weight. The volume of oil, 16 ounces. For every 16 ounces of oil by volume is 1¼ ounces by weight of beeswax. I'll say it again. 16 ounces oil volume, 1¼ ounces beeswax weight. There's your starting spot. You'll start with that ratio. You'll make your product based on how you feel about that, what you're working with. You can adjust these ratios. The more beeswax that you use, you're going to get a stiffer product at the end, a salve. The less beeswax that you use, therefore, a looser product, a lighter product, softer lotion, right? So you're going to add your oil and your beeswax into your double boiler. And as you can see from my double boiler, I'm using a stainless steel bowl over top of a pot of boiling water. Simple stuff, man. We don't need you to go buy a bunch of stuff. I want herbalism to be accessible to all people with the tools that we already have in our households. We can all be doing these things. So we're going to add our oil and our beeswax into this container. We're going to heat it up. We're essentially just melting that beeswax to immerse it amongst the oil. Stir it in so it's all mixed through. Now, if you are a person that likes to use essential oils, and I don't typically use a lot of them, but if you do, the stage that you want to add the essential oil to your salve is as soon as you're taking that oil off of the heat. If you add it too soon, the essential oils are very volatile and they're just going to quickly evaporate. We don't want that. If you wait too late, they're not going to be able to be fully immersed amongst the product, and you'll have some products that are stronger than others. The oil, the essential oil, just sit on top. It's not going to work. So once your beeswax is all melted and you're just about to take it off the heat, add your essential oils, mix it, and then pour it into these containers. Now I'm using these little tins right here. I got some 1 and 2 ounce tins that I like to use, a little screw top thing, real fancy stuff. But you don't have to do that if you don't want. You can use anything that you have at home, reusing a glass jar from the kitchen, a baby food jar, whatever it may be. One thing to note, if you're going to use something like a soft plastic type of container, realize that what you're pouring into this container is very hot oil and wax. And you don't want to pour this very hot oil and wax into a flimsy plastic container. Very dangerous. So barring that, you can use any kind of container you want. But you got to think safety first. These things are all very hot. That stainless steel bowl sitting on top of that double boiler, that's hot. use a hot pad or some gloves. You got to be cautious. But anyways, you're going to pour it off into these containers and let it cool. As it cools, it solidifies. Now you've got your product. It's just that easy. Now let's look at this picture real quick. These are some different oils that we offer at Small House. It's all seasonal based on what we have access to or what we're pressing. But I thought this was a nice shot. This was at peak season when I had a lot of different things going on. What I'd like to show this is, when we're working with herbs and we're making these herbal products, we choose the herbs that we use for their specific reasons. We have this ultimate end goal, whether it's to heal a rash or alleviate sore muscles, or whatever it may be. We're choosing these herbs for these particular benefits. And then everybody seems to willy-nilly just choose olive oil, coconut oil, or grapeseed oil as the carrier oil that they use for their products, which is fine if that's what you have accessible to you. But let's think about it a little bit further. The herbs themselves have benefits. The oils that we use also are coming from plants, each of which has specific chemical constituents, each of which can be beneficial to our formulas, right? Here's an example. We make a healing salve. It's good for cuts and scratches and bruises and abrasions and that sort of thing. And we use comfrey and yarrow are the two herbs that we use in there. And we'll talk about them more in a little bit, I'm sure. But I specifically use sunflower oil in this product because sunflower oil is naturally very high in vitamin E. And vitamin E is an essential skin nutrient. And if I'm making a product specifically to heal and nourish the skin, I choose an oil that's going to do that all on its own as well, right? Thus enhancing my product and making it even better than it could be. So considering our oil as part of the formula, I think that's an important part of the process as well. Now let's talk about tinctures. Tinctures are kind of what people think about when we think about herbal medicine. Certainly, these old dusty bottles on a shelf somewhere. This is a picture I snagged off the internet because I was just looking for a bunch of old medicine bottles. I thought that'd be fun. I didn't realize really what these pictures were of. I'll give you a chance to look at them if you want. I think it's kind of fun. They're all different cannabis extracts. I thought that was pretty neat. But here's some that we make as well. So this is the next photo that we could use. Now with these tinctures, what we're doing here is we're making an extract using alcohol, right? We're using alcohol as the menstruum. A menstruum is an herbalist word for essentially the solvent that we use to extract the chemicals from the plant material. With the tincture, we're going to use alcohol as our menstruum. Now, while I mentioned that some chemical constituents are water soluble, even more of them are fat soluble. Almost all of them are alcohol soluble. So tinctures are very potent herbal medicines. They need to be treated as such. When we drink a cup of tea, we're going to drink 6 to 8 ounces of tea 3 to 4 times a day, large quantities of liquid, but not with the tincture. No, with tinctures, we're going to measure our doses essentially by the drops, by the quarter teaspoon, by the dropper full is a large dose, much smaller doses of very potent herbal medicine. You can take them sublingually, right under your tongue, or some people like to dilute them in some tea or water or juice because they are quite potent at times. Now, what kind of alcohol do we want to use when we make our tincture? Well, essentially that's up to you. I recommend using at least 100 proof. You want to use some 100 proof if you can, simply because it's about 50% alcohol. I use vodka the most, simply because, well, one, it's economical. Vodka is inexpensive, but also because vodka has very little flavor or scent. And that allows the herbs to really stand up in the product. So you can really taste and smell the herbs. If you look at old-fashioned herbals, really ancient texts, a lot of times they infuse their herbs in wine. And maybe that's just because that's what they had. But that's not something that we necessarily want to do, because wine has a significantly lower alcohol content and is going to give us a significantly less potent formula, right? So we want to go with something a little bit stronger, like I said, 100 proof. Now, you don't have to use vodka, though. Some people like to use a brandy or rum or gin or whatever it is that you like or that you have accessible to you is perfectly acceptable. Try some different products and see what you prefer. That's some of the beauty of herbalism is we can kind of customize what we're doing to fit our needs and our desires as well as those of our particular communities. We're going to make our tinctures very similar to how we made our infused oils. We're going to get our mason jar, load it about halfway full with dried herbs if possible, right? And then top that off 2 fingers deep with the alcohol. Label it with the name of the herb, the type of alcohol that you've used, and the date. Put it away in a cool, dark place. Again, 4 to 6 weeks. When that time is up, you can take it out, strain it off really nice, and bottle it up. You can see here I'm using these little 2-ounce bottles because I don't need a lot of these medicinals. A small bottle is going to go a long way. A little 2-ounce bottle with the dropper top, which is for ease of measuring when I have to measure out my doses later. So now we've talked about 3 of the most popular vehicles for utilizing our herbs. So now let's talk about some of the herbs. You see it says local herbs here because I'm a huge proponent of local herbs. And when you buy my book and read it, you're going to realize that I focus on local herbs throughout the book as well. Because I think that it's important to realize that in our parks, in our fields, in our forests, and our gardens, and even in our spice racks at home, we have access to a bevy of herbs, a wonderland of goodness, right? And we just need to take the time to look for it. So let's talk about a few of these local herbs, and why these are beneficial. Right. First off, the freshness of the product, right? When I'm working with local herbs, whether it's an herb of mine or an herb from a farmer that I get to meet, I know how it's being grown, I know how and when it's harvested, and I know how it's processed. That's very important. It's very important when I'm making food and medicine for myself, for my family, and my community. I want to make sure that every ingredient is of the highest possible quality. Here's an example. On the left here, in this picture on the left, is it's yarrow, is what we're looking at. Achillea millifolia, plant that I love. It's a potent herb. It's very astringent in flavor. If you've ever had yarrow, you know. When you chew it up, you will recognize that taste for the rest of your life. And when we do herb walks, I always want people to taste and smell plants as often as possible. And I always have people chew up yarrow because it is such a distinct flavor that you will remember it for all time. It's not necessarily the most palatable, and a lot of people don't enjoy it, but it's important to know. I'd like to leave the yarrow at the end of the herb walk because after they eat the yarrow, they're not as likely to eat things that I hand them after that. So I put it towards the end. But yarrow is a potent styptic, which means you can take a leaf of a yarrow plant and chew it up and put it on a cut, put the paste right over top of the cut, and it'll stop bleeding on contact. So great first aid herb, especially when you're out in the wild. It's an antiseptic. It's a great plant. So I want to make sure everybody knows it. Anyways, here's some yarrow from the field near my home. As you can see on the left, we've dried this yarrow, and I keep it in that glass jar in the background of this picture. And you can even see blurry in the background of this picture where I have the label. Everything's well labeled, but I don't necessarily need this label because I know yarrow so well. Blindfold, I could open this jar and smell it, and I could tell you that's yarrow for sure. I can look at it and identify it visually. That's yarrow for sure. Now look at the picture on the right. This is some herb from one of the most well-known online herb suppliers. We won't mention any names because that's not necessary, but this is a very reputable company. And this is some yarrow leaf and flower that they sent me in the mail one time. Now visually, when I look at it, it's kind of hard to tell what that is, when you smell it, like, hey. So with the blindfold on, I would have no idea what this plant was. Even with the blindfold off, I'd have a very hard time knowing what this plant was. Unless it didn't say yarrow on the package, I would have no idea what this was from one of the most well-known herb companies on the internet. Interesting to think about, but it doesn't much matter to me because I know that in the field near my home, there's plenty of yarrow to be had. So this is a great visual example of why local herbs are always superior to what we could purchase. Here's some more reasons: environmental impact, educational opportunities, and the marketability of using local herbs. Now, this is the most dramatic picture I could find of trucks on the highway. After I collected it and decided to use it today, I realized that these trucks aren't actually hauling anything, but you get the point that I'm trying to make here. Let's just kind of visualize for a moment the environmental impact of some of the herbs that we might choose to purchase. A lot of the herbs that we buy here in the United States are not grown here in the United States, right? If you guys are in other countries, I know a lot of people are visiting us from around the world, so it may be a different scenario where you're at, but here in the States, it's far more economical for herb producers to pay somebody in a different place to grow and harvest the herbs than it is to just pay a local grower to do it, right? So a guy's on the other side of the world. He gets up in the morning, he drives his car to work, he goes to his farm, he harvests all these herbs, and they put them on a slow boat or an airplane, and they fly it over to the States, right? And then they got to load it onto a truck and they take it to a warehouse, and then somebody comes to the warehouse and loads it onto a truck and takes it to the local co-op. And then the co-op employee's got to drive his car to work, and I got to get up and I drive my car to the co-op and buy these herbs. Think about that. Or I could just go to the field near my home and harvest those herbs. Think about educational opportunities. So we do a sore muscle rub that we make at Small House. It was in one of the pictures at some point earlier, that red salve. It's probably one of our most popular products. It's a topical rub for inflammation, joint pain, sore muscles, and that sort of thing. And when people come to the farmer's market to chat with me, they see that and they always say, oh, sore muscles, you must be using arnica. Arnica must be the herb. I read about arnica on the internet, and I'm going to assume you use arnica in your product. And arnica is a great herb, certainly, but there's not arnica that grows in Michigan, where I'm at. There is one species of arnica that grows up north, but it's endangered and I'm not allowed to harvest it. So unless I was going to cultivate arnica, I don't have access to that. And I don't necessarily need it, because growing abundantly throughout the forest floor around me is a plant called wintergreen. And in the leaves of wintergreen, there's a compound called methyl salicylate, very similar to what they use to make aspirin. And through a fat extraction, it's a fat soluble chemical. When I infuse it in oil, I can extract that methyl salicylate and make a topical product that is incredibly potent for sore muscles. So I don't need to worry about purchasing arnica, because even in my own backyard, Mother Nature provides for everything that I need. And I had the opportunity to learn about the plants right outside my back door. That's pretty cool. Sticking with local herbs may be challenging, but again, these challenges lead to opportunities. Let's talk about marketability. Now, you may not be coming to this conversation today to learn about how to market herbs. If you're interested in starting an herbal business, then my book is certainly for you. The last chapter of the Artisan Herbalist actually focuses on everything that you need to know to start an herb-based business from your home. But the reason I want to talk about this today is because of what these local herbs mean to me as a commercial herb producer. From our homestead to yours is our slogan that you'll see on a lot of our products and stuff. And that does sound nice, but it's actually as accurate as could be, because everything that you can buy from Small House comes from my home and it ends up going to your home, right? So that means something. People like to support local. As the local food movement grows, a lot more people are getting turned on to that. They like to buy local. They like to know their local farmers. They like to know their local herbalists and that sort of thing. And that's awesome stuff. But with that comes some serious responsibility, right? If somebody's going to purchase my product because it's locally made and take it home to their house, it has got to be the absolute greatest thing that they've ever had. I have to ensure the highest quality product. I want these guys to be turned on by local. I want them to say, wow, this really was worth the extra money. This really was worth that time to hunt this guy down. And they're going to continue to purchase local, right? It's not just a tagline to make a quick buck. It is a philosophy and a way of life that all of us could maybe adapt. If we take the time to think more locally and to be more local, even the slightest tweak in the way that we think about things. If I change a little bit about the way I think, maybe change a little bit about the way I buy, and each one of us does that just a little bit. Imagine the impact that we could have on the world, right? Now let's talk about some specific plants, shall we? Talk about these cultivated plants first. Now this is thyme, Thymus vulgaris. Is a plant that you all are likely to be familiar with. Wonderful herb, easy to grow. It's in the mint family. Very productive, very useful. The active chemical component in this plant is called thymol. Very easy to remember, thymol, right? And if you were to ever go and purchase a mouthwash product or hand sanitizer, a non-alcohol based hand sanitizer product, the active ingredient, thymol. That's how powerful this herb is, right? It's antibacterial, it's antiseptic, potent stuff. Another interesting thing about thyme is it makes a potent expectorant. Got a bad cough, respiratory issue, make yourself a strong cup of thyme tea. It's really going to set you up right. How about catnip? Nepatica cataria. Now we're all familiar with this herb because our kitty cats love it. Also in the mint family, as you can tell by the square stem. Now, being in the mint family, Lamiaceae being the plant family, a number of these herbs have a lot of overlap in their usage, right? These plants are wonderful for digestive issues, stomach upsets, muscle spasms, cramping, all those things. It's a very gentle herb. I use it with my children. My boys are not into mint flavor. I can make them a mint tea if they had a stomach upset, but they won't drink that. But I can make them a catnip tea. It's just as effective, and they absolutely love the flavor. Another interesting thing about catnip is the volatile oil in catnip actually repels insects from 13 different families of insects. Now, I'm no entomologist, so I can't tell you 13 different families of insects, but I can tell you this: flies, fleas, mosquitoes, ticks, spiders, all those things that you don't like, they don't like catnip. We offer a bug spray product that we make, and one of the active ingredients, the secret ingredient, catnip. How about sage? Salvia, from the Latin salvar, which means to save. Why would a man die who has sage in his garden? what they used to say. And they believed that sage was a tonic herb. They would drink it daily to promote a long and healthy life. It's in the mint family, so that overlap is something that we're aware of. But it is also a great antiseptic. It makes a great wash if you have a strong water infusion for skin issues, rashes, and that sorts of thing. It's astringent. It's great to make a mouthwash with if you suffer from dental issues, or even as a scalp wash if you've got dandruff. Try making a strong sage infusion like we talked about, using that as a hair wash. Lavender, lavar, meaning to wash. Great antibacterial herb that you can use for a number of things. It's great, obviously, on burns and cuts and scratches and that sort of thing to clean a wound. Here in the States, up until World War I, they actually used lavender to clean surfaces in hospitals. That's how powerful this plant is. Still is, but sometimes it doesn't get acknowledged just because everybody's into those synthetic chemicals. But that's not the debate for today, is it? How about hops? We grow a lot of hops here. Actually, right on the opposite side of this wall is our hops. We have grown all the way along the barn. I originally started growing them because to brew beer and such. The shoots, when they're young, are edible. They're like asparagus, so it makes a nice snack. That's really good. But hops, from an herbal standpoint, is a very relaxing herb. It can be used as a sedative. You can brew yourself a hops tea, and it is really going to help you calm down and chill out a little bit. But if you really need something more potent than that, you can make a hops tincture. It only needs to infuse for about 2 to 4 weeks. After that, it gets quite bitter. But even at a 4-week tincture, this is a very powerful herb, right? So you take a quarter dropper of this, and if you're talking about you need to get to sleep, if you got stage fright, anxiety, any of those sorts of things, this hops tincture is really going to help chill you out. Now let's move on to some local allies. These are plants that we don't necessarily cultivate, but grow wild around us. And I like to use the word ally. And when you buy my book, you'll realize that, again, throughout all of the useful information on how to work with these herbs, I've also laced kind of my philosophy on how we should build relationships with our herbs. It's important that we understand that these herbs are not, they're not commodities. They're not simply inputs or ingredients that I can use to make a buck. That's not what it's all about. These herbs are our allies. They're our partners. We work together hand in hand in a synergistic relationship. I like to give myself more credit than I deserve, probably, because if we think about it, if there wasn't people here on the planet, the plants would be just fine. But without plants, we'd be in a bad situation, right? So the plants really do have the upper hand. And I believe that it is crucial for now, as well as our well-being in the future, that we learn to respect Mother Earth and the plants that she provides for us. Let's talk about dandelions. Dente de Leon, from the French, from the teeth of the lion, based on the shape of the leaf here, right? It's that jagged thing, kind of looks like teeth. Dandelion, for right here where I'm at in Michigan, is coming up like crazy right now. This is the perfect time to harvest it. It's a very bitter green. You gather these leaves and eat them like salad. This bitter taste is going to help stimulate your digestion, move that bile through your liver. It's wonderful for your internal organs. It's kind of a great spring reset after a long winter of eating packaged salty foods, canned foods, smoked meats, all those sorts of things. You can also harvest the root and make a tincture with it. Absolutely wonderful. You make a dandelion tincture, take a little bit of that every day as a tonic herb, and within a week, boy, there's going to be some pep in your step. You're just going to feel vibrant and alive. All plants of this part are edible, from the tip of the root to the top of the flower. You can use all of it. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica. It's got hairs on the bottom of the leaves and along the stems. On the trichomes, the very tips of the trichomes, is formic acid, right? Very similar to a red ant bite. It's kind of a defense mechanism for the plant. You rub up against these nettles, it's going to give you a stinging, burning sensation, right? But that stinging, burning also opens up the capillaries and stimulates blood flow. It is wonderful topically for inflammation, joint pain, and arthritis. In that red label salve that I talked about earlier, this is one of the ingredients that we use. It's also a delicious spring herb to eat. Exposing it to heat or drying it out is going to take care of that formic acid so it doesn't burn. So you can dry it out to make a great tea in the winter. It's high in minerals, iron, magnesium, all sorts of good stuff. Or you can cook it like a spring green and add it to soups. Delicious and nutritious. Jewelweed. Now, jewelweed is a fun plant. It's got, when you break the stems open, it's got a clear sap that kind of runs through there. And this sap is going to be the greatest thing that you can put on your skin for poison ivy. I'm telling you what. Now, I've read that indigenous people here in North America used to put jewelweed on their skin before they went out in the woods as a preventative against poison ivy. And I've never been brave enough to try that, but I've certainly used it after exposure to poison ivy, and it works wonders. Here's the trick. Take the plant, chop it up fresh, put it in some water, put it in ice cube trays, right? Get to a poison ivy situation, pop out one of those ice cubes and apply it to the area. Not only is the soothing, cool from the ice cube nice, but then you get the healing medicinals from the jewelweed that's going to help take care of that poison ivy problem. Red clover, I'm a big fan of red clover. The whole plant's edible. The flower is the most delightful part. That nectar in there gives it a sweet flavor. I like to add it to teas, put it on salads and that sort of thing. Interesting. I read recently in an article that there's a compound in red clover that they're working to isolate because they believe that it has something in it that's going to help battle tumors and anti-tumor agents. So they're looking about making possibly a cancer medication. Now, we can't make those kind of claims necessarily, but it is certainly interesting. And I know it doesn't hurt at all to add some of these red clovers to your tea and to your salads. Plantain, Plantigo major. I could talk all day about this herb. Not native to North America. Likely it was brought here by Europeans, but it's delicious. It's edible. Chew up some plantain leaf, put it on a bug bite or a bee sting. It's going to take care of the itch and the swelling immediately. Witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana is the one here. We gather the bark and we make a decoction. Let's talk about that. A decoction is similar to an infusion, a water infusion, but a decoction is boiled. Right, where with an infusion, we add the hot water to the herb and let it just pull the chemicals out of the plant material. With things with bark, roots, thick shelled seeds, those types of things, we need to break down that cell wall. It's going to take a little bit more work. So with the bark of witch hazel, we're actually going to boil it for some time. And it's going to soften that up and break down that plant material to get it to release its chemicals. Makes a wonderful astringent toner for your face. Goldenrod. Now, people give goldenrod a bad name because they think it affects their allergies. But it doesn't. The pollen from goldenrod barely travels a foot. It's very heavy stuff. But at the same time that this plant is shedding pollen, so is ragweed, a very light pollen. It gets very far away. It travels long ways and bothers all of us. Coincidentally, a tea made from goldenrod will help battle ragweed allergies. Autumn olive. Now here in North America, this is a invasive plant, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about invasives or what the most invasive things are, but we all know that the human beings are the most invasive species, right? An autumn olive has more lycopene, antioxidant per cup than a cup of tomatoes. It's wildly nutritious. Queen Anne's lace, the wild carrot, all carrots ever that you've ever eaten, no matter what color, orange, purple, yellow, whatever, they've all come from this wild plant right here, the wild carrot. And it's a biennial, and you can pull that root up the second year, and it tastes like a carrot. You can take these flowers here and brew it like a strong tea, like a strong infusion, and then use that infusion as the fruit juice in a jelly recipe. I tell you, it's going to make the best jelly you've ever had. Let's take a minute. I'm going to do it. We got to talk about this for a second. We got to talk about invasive plants. I wouldn't be doing justice for the day if we didn't touch on this really quickly. Here in North America, this is a wildly invasive plant. People get really upset about it, and they don't like me to say things positive about the plant because they don't want to encourage people to use it, right? There's a guy not far from me that makes an autumn olive berry jelly. He sells it online. He has a very successful business doing this, utilizing the invasive plants in his yard, making the most of them. Well, over time, he's been so successful, he's bought a pitter, a machine that takes the seeds out of the berries. So he's ended up with a lot of these seeds. And one day he came to me and asked me to use my oil press to extract some oil from these seeds, which I did. And it didn't yield very well at all, but I did get a bit of oil, which I gave back to him. And I followed up with him in a couple months to ask him whatever became of it. He had sent this oil off to a laboratory where they were doing testing on this oil, again, as a cancer medication. And I just thought that that was really interesting because where I'm at, autumn olive is abundant everywhere, more so every year. And where I'm at, cancer patients are everywhere, more abundant every year. And it's almost as if Mother Nature is literally trying to give us what we need to help us with the problem that we have. And we, for some reason, feel we won't look at that the way that she wants us to. That maybe we think we're too smart for that, that we choose where the invasives are. And I feel that maybe sometimes we do a disservice when we don't slow down a little bit and listen to what Mother Nature has to say. There's my soapbox on that. Elderberries, we're all familiar with elderberries. It's antibacterial, it's antiviral. help to boost the immune system, right? Chicory grows on roadsides everywhere out here by me. You can harvest the roots and roast them and make a coffee substitute. It's very, very strong and black. You can add it into your coffee. Makes quite a beverage. Very popular in Louisiana. I had some down in Louisiana one time. I didn't even have a beard until I drank chicory coffee. Now I can't get rid of it. White pine. Big fan of white pine. Now that's the state tree here in Michigan. And it can be identified because the needles come in a cluster of 5. It's the only pine where the needles come in a cluster of 5, the white pine. And it's very high in vitamin C, these needles. And that's especially useful, say, in the winter. What if you weren't prepared as an herbalist when winter came? Get a cold or a flu and you're sick and you need some vitamin C medicine. And you go outside to gather some herbs and everything's covered in snow. Well, white pine's accessible because she's standing tall above the snow up in the air just waiting for you. And you can come gather these needles and make a strong tea with it. I like to add a little bit of garlic to it. That's going to set you up just right if you're suffering from the cold. Mullein, or as my son calls it, the toilet paper plant, but I'm not allowed to tell that story. Indigenous people here in North America would use mullein for pulmonary issues, for respiratory trouble. They would actually smoke the leaves. I have not done that, but you can make a tea from the leaves, which are going to be great for a respiratory scenario. The key here, though, is to make sure it's well strained and filtered out. These leaves have very little hairs in them. You get little hairs in your tea, you're going to be worse off than you started. So make sure it's a well-filtered tea. Yarrow, talked about yarrow already. Look how beautiful that is. Wintergreen. Wintergreen we've also covered. Probably one of my favorite herbs. I talk a lot about wintergreen. On the New Society website, I wrote a blog for their blog. I wrote a post all about wintergreen and the relationship that we have together because it is such a special plant. You can see it's got tough, glossy leaves here. So if you're going to make a tea out of it, you want to break these leaves apart, cut them with scissors or tear them by hand or something to kind of break them open. It's going to be a lot easier to brew a tasty tea that way. If you're looking to use it medicinally, overnight infusion in water is what you're going to want. Topically, oil infusion. Sorrel, oxalis, high in vitamin C. It's tangy. It's so flavorful. You're going to find this in your gardens every time you're weeding. Eat it, man. Your weeds are snacks, right? Strawberry and raspberry. The leaves of both of these plants can be brewed into teas that are wonderful for menstruation, cramping, feminine issues of that nature. These 2 herbs are going to be wonderful for that. Chickweed, Stellaria media, amongst the stars. Chickweed is an early spring plant here. You can use it topically in an oil infusion. It is wonderful for dry, itchy, cracky skin, red, blistery types of things. It's really going to be soothing, soft herb. Horsetail is high in silica and therefore can be used in an oil infusion for your hair as well as your fingernails topically. So if you got soft, cracky fingernails. Yellow dock. Now, yellow dock is cool because you could chew up the leaves just like we talked about doing with the yarrow. You could chew that up and apply it to where you've got in a nettle sting, the stinging nettles. You can put the dock on there. It's really going to help relieve that. And just like it's almost like Mother Nature has a plan, pretty much everywhere you're going to find nettles, you're going to find dock right next door. It's like they come together. It's like as if Mother Nature provides for our every need, right? Sumac. This is staghorn sumac. The berry is here at the top. They have some species like in India, I know that's very popular as a spice. I like to put it on salmon. That's good. But you could take one of these, cut that berry right off, overnight infusion in your refrigerator with some water. It's going to be like the tastiest lemonade you have ever had. Lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters is a plant that's in everybody's garden. It's a weed that just drives people bonkers, but it's delicious. It's nutritious. It's like a wild spinach. It is so good for you. Soft little leaves. I like to take the plant, I'll cut them right at the stems and bring a whole bunch of them in and put them in a vase in my kitchen. So that way, every time I'm cooking a meal, here's the plant, and I just top of mind, and I just add it to the dishes as I cook. The thing that's interesting about this, down in Peru, there's a plant called quinoa, right? That grows, that everybody really loves. And they bring the seeds up to the United States and they sell it at the health food store for a ridiculous price per pound. People love to just gobble it up. You drive to the health food store and buy this quinoa, which is great. But that's Chenopodium quinoa. And this is Chenopodium alba. And they're so closely related that if you grow them next to each other, you almost can't distinguish one from the other. Why go and buy these things that are literally grown in our own backyards? How about St. John's wort? Hypericum perforatum. In the 90s here in the States, this was a really popular plant people would use for for depression as a mood enhancer. And the science is really out on that sort of thing. But I like to use St. John's wort flowers. I harvest them around the summer solstice. That's when they're in full bloom. And I infuse them in oil, and we use it as a topical treatment for nerve pain. It's a nervine. It's great for nerve issues, fibromyalgia, and that sort of thing. Hypericin is the chemical that's in it. And even as you're picking the flowers, it'll stain your fingers red. And when it infuses in the oil, it's the most beautiful red color. Serviceberry and melanchier. This is a great landscaping tree. They're one of the first trees to flower around here. Beautiful. It makes these delicious edible berries. Mustard. Wild mustard's edible. You know, if we think about things like cabbage and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and collard greens and all those things, those all derive from the wild mustard plant, right? With this plant right here that grows all over the place, which is edible. Some are more bitter than others, so you're going to want to sample them. You could gather the seeds and even make yourself a condiment. Milkweed. We won't get into milkweed too much because milkweed's great for the monarchs and everybody loves monarchs. So I won't give you any encouragement to do anything but leave the milkweed for the monarchs. Ground ivy, creeping Charlie. In the mint family, delicious. People go bonkers over this plant because it'll take over your garden so fast. I love it. I've dedicated a whole corner of my greenhouse to this plant. As long as you harvest it regularly, you can somewhat contain it. Infuse it in oil. It's very high in minerals. You can use it that way. I like to put it in vinegar, make a salad dressing out of it. Oh, it's such a good spring tonic herb. It's flavorful. It's delicious. Great stuff. Creeping Charlie. Burdock, the original Velcro. Bone sap. This is a fun plant. Despite the name bone sap, it's actually best for cough and sore throat and that sort of thing. You can make a tea from it. How about cattails? The wild corn dog. It's actually an edible plant. The tuber is the best part. The underneath the root, you can gather this up and eat it. It kind of tastes like a potato if you're so like-minded. Now, how many plants did we just talk about? There's a lot. I covered a lot of things. I crammed a lot of stuff into a small space intentionally because I wanted you guys to think about the amount of diversity there is there. And you know, all those plants have in common is that they're all a bike ride from my home, within a mile of my house. Every single one of those plants, food and medicine, whatever my heart desires, it's within a bike ride from my home. And no matter where you are, whether you live in the country or you live in the city, close to your home is such an array of exciting herbs that you can work with for your food as well as your medicine. If we just take the time to look and see and observe all of the gifts that nature has offered us, it's abundant. So we're coming back to this: thinking local, buying local, and being local, right? If this is the only thing you take away from listening to me talk today, is understanding the importance of local and the impact that we can have. Again, I'll say, if we just change a little bit about the way that we think about things and the way that we buy things and the way that we choose to be, just the slightest change can make such an impact. If you want to stay in touch with me, this is how you're going to do that. With Facebook and Instagram and that sort of thing through Small House Farm. If you want to watch us foraging or gardening or harvesting seeds or what have you, there's our YouTube channel. That's a ton of fun. And then, of course, the website is where all the action is. If you want to learn more about Small House Farm and stay in touch with me, I recommend visiting the website, smallhousefarm.com. We can stay in touch no matter where in the world you are because we live in this wonderful digital era. So we can stay connected, we can share with each other, we can learn from each other, and you should scoot on over to the New Society website and get a copy of the Artisan Herbalist, which is everything that I just said today, but even more so, and you can take it home with you and read it at your own leisure. And that's pretty groovy. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Bevin. That was excellent. We have lots of questions to get to, and I just realized I would be remiss if I didn't hold up a copy of your beautiful book, The Artisan Herbalist, Making Teas, Tinctures, and Oils at Home, which you can get from newsociety.com with the code BEVIN25 and receive a 25% discount on this beautiful full color book that will, if you've forgotten any of the things that we may have spoken about, it's all in here for you. So we would like to get to some questions. We do still have our book giveaway to do, as well as our Harrow Smith magazine. giveaway, but I wanted to get to some of the great questions that people have been asking throughout. The first one comes to us from Janet, who was watching us on Facebook. And she asks, with regards to water infusion, doesn't heating the water also affect the potency of the infusion?
Well, certainly it does. Actually, what's going to happen when we heat the water is we're going to actually make the infusion faster. Just like you can do the same thing with an oil infusion by adding heat to it, it's going to make it happen faster. You can make a cold water infusion, most certainly, if you're especially if you're working with delicate herbs like flowers and things like that. But it's going to take a significantly more time, right? Adding that heat is going to speed up the process. But a cold water infusion will certainly work, but I would double the amount of steeping time to get a similar product.
Great, thank you. And then I think this one from Cindy Miller, she has two questions and is actually our book winner, who has won a copy of the Artisan Herbalist, and Cindy will be in touch with you to get all of your information. And she's asking, and I believe that this is referring to the tinctures, how long would they retain their potency, and would they ever become unsafe?
That's a great question, and congratulations on winning the book as well. Now, what's great about a tincture is the alcohol really acts as a preservative. So these are going to have the longest shelf life out of any of the products that we talked about. Herbal tincture is going to be able to keep for a year or longer, no problem at all. It's really not going to lose any of its potency, but after a year, I always recommend starting to reevaluate some of the products that we're making. If you're making tinctures and stuff and you're not using them within a year, maybe you don't need to make so much. Maybe you don't need to harvest so much. Maybe you want to focus on some other things instead.
That's great advice. Okay, and another one from Aaron on Zoom. Is there a good substitute for beeswax in case of allergies?
That's a good question, and they do offer some different beeswax alternatives, and that's something that we get into in the book, actually in depth, is talking about some of those things, because some folks even don't like to use beeswax because they prefer not to use animal products, animal byproducts. And, beeswax, coming from bees and stuff, some people like to steer clear of that. So there certainly are some alternative options as well. And we really delve into that in the book really, really well, because I wanted to cover that for everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you. A question from Becky, who's coming to us from the UK. And she said that she's only seen valerian root used and noticed you had valerian flower tincture in your picture. What would you use that for? And she mentions that she's just started growing valerian in her own garden. So she's curious.
So now valerian flower is going to be used for the same thing that we would use the root for, which is as a relaxing, sedative, calming type of herb, as a sleep aid or for anxiety and stress. The reason that we use the flower, it's kind of a twofold reason. One, it's far more palatable. Valerian root is awful tasting. It smells. it's bad news, So that the flower is a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot more palatable, and it's a little more mild. So it's not as potent. I find for myself personally, when I use valerian root products, I can almost still feel it the next day. I almost get like a hangover from it. Whereas with the flower, it's a lot more delicate, and I don't tend to have that issue.
Okay, that's great. Okay, this one is kind of a funny question. Well, I should say a fun question. It comes from Stephanie, and she asks if adding catnip to your bug spray attracts cats while you're out and about. So I don't know if you've ever had a problem with that.
We've joked about that in different forms. We've made jokes like that. And no, it's unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on your opinion, does not attract any cats. And the funny thing about catnip, it's so popular, that the trope about, cats being attracted to it, but it's only about 33% of cats that actually are even affected by it.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Jill is asking, is there another name for jewelweed? I think that she may be.
Yeah, some people call it touch-me-not is a popular name for it, because of the way that the seed forms in the capsule. The dispersal mechanism is if even the slightest touch, it's going to pop it open and launch those seeds out. You can almost hear it make that sound. So yeah, that's another name for it, is the touch-me-not. So because you touch it, the seeds pop out.
Great. And then Jasmine asks, how can you get the same effect from the seeds if you can't extract the oil from autumn olive?
Well, and so that's a good question. And where we were at, and really the reason I wanted to tell that story was to highlight the potency of plants that are offered to us by nature, even though our big brain sometimes tries to outthink ourselves. Um, that science is still in the works as far as extracting those chemicals from the autumn olive seed. So I don't have any specific advice on how to make that medicinal at home because that's really still, it's in the laboratory stage where they're working with that.
Okay, great. And then what would be, Cindy's asking, what would be the best herbs to grow for a new gardener for making tea? So where's a good starting point if you're just getting growing?
That's an awesome question. And I'm going to tell you mint family, right? Which isn't just mint. You know, we've got mint, obviously, oregano, lemon balm, lavender. There's so many plants in the mint family that are sage, thyme, all of those. And they're very easy to grow for the most part. Some of them are more hardy than others. Obviously, lavender may not overwinter as well, but some you're never going to get rid of. Things like lemon balm and mint, once they're established, you will have for all time. So if you're a new gardener, start with some of those. You will have them for your entire experience, for sure. But I mean, think about what's going on in your own backyard, and Mother Nature's already doing the work on things like plantain and dandelion. You don't even need to garden, and those are right there waiting for you as well.
Yeah, and those are really great urban ones as well. I find plantain just and the dandelion even grows through the cracks in the sidewalks.
Isn't it amazing?
Oh, great. And then with mint, I had a yard that lemon balm just grew everywhere, and then the mint took over. So I've personally, with my mint, I'm growing it in a container right now, but so it doesn't take over certain spots. But if you have lots of room, I think that they're such great, beautiful plants too, and they smell so wonderful. Okay, Clara says, great presentation. When foraging for local allies, what is your rule of thumb as to how much to harvest and how much to leave in place?
That's such a good question. You know, and that's something that we start the Artisan Herbalist talking about this because I really wanted to kind of set that stage right away to understand the importance of responsible harvesting. So I'm glad that you asked this. I like to say about a third. Don't take more than a third of any stand of plants that you find. You know, not only because you want to leave a significant amount there for animals, for nature, for it to be able to reproduce, to keep it going, but also there's more foragers coming after you. More and more every year, it seems more people are turning back to the land, which is awesome. But we can only take our very, very fair share to ensure that there's enough for everybody.
Great. And one question coming from Allie is asking, are there any oils that you wouldn't want to mix together?
Well, not necessarily that I would say you wouldn't want to mix together. I think adding oils together would be perfectly fine. You'll notice with some oils, the viscosity is a little bit different. Some are a little thicker than others, and they may not stay blended. They'll separate over time. But if we want to think about oils to avoid, and this is something I should have touched on, so this is a good question too. If you're going to purchase oils at the grocery store, look at the label on the back and see how they're being made. And you're looking for words like cold pressed and expeller pressed. That's very important. A cold press oil is simply expeller pressed, but under a certain degree. It's kept below 120 degrees Fahrenheit to ensure that none of the nutrition or flavor is broken down. But expeller press is also good. If it doesn't say these things, you can assume, and almost be correct most of the time, that they're solvent extractions. And they're using hexane, which is just a couple molecules away from gasoline, to extract these oils from these plants. And that may not be something that you want to put on your body. That's up to you.
Okay, good to know. Good advice. And then the last question is, it's come from a couple of people, is do you have any tips for drying herbs?
Sure. Now, you want to dry your herbs, especially if you want to keep the color and stuff. You want to be able to dry them down quickly. The longer it takes, the more they're going to oxidize, they're going to discolor, they're going to turn brown, and that sort of thing. So drying them quickly. We will put our herbs out on screens, screen doors, that sort of thing. And I'll use a light fan to keep an airflow. You want to keep it cool and dark. A little bit of airflow is going to help dry them down quickly.
And so what about, I've seen people put them in like paper bags, put them and tie them up. Is that
sure? That'll work fine. I mean, the trick with that is going to be if it's like very humid where you're at in the summertime. That's not necessarily ideal inside of that bag. Those bundles, when you bundle herbs up like that, at least for myself, I have a tendency to try to bundle too many at a time. and that center isn't going to get any airflow, and you're going to get mold that's going to start to develop in there. So make sure they're small bundles, and then they should be fine. But you want to make sure put a breeze on them is going to help a lot.
Okay. And I did say that was the last question, but one more is somebody was asking about why you're putting your tinctures in the dark. Wouldn't the sunlight be more beneficial? I guess, so I don't know if that's.
I like to keep things in the dark because the sun is actually going to break things down. Keeping things in the dark is going to act as a preservative to ensure the longevity of the product.
Great. Super. Well, I wanted to thank you because, of course, it's Earth Day today. And so what a wonderful way to celebrate and by talking about all of these wonderful plants that offer us so much. So thank you for that. And we have a winner as well for our Herbalist magazine. And I think that is Lipa Long. So Lipa, you have won a copy of, not a copy, a subscription, a year subscription to Herbalist magazine. And we just wanted to remind everybody of our next event, which is May 13th with Blake Cothran, who's going to be talking to us all about pawpaws. So if you're curious, please register. We do have the link there in the chat for registering for that event. I want to thank Bevin again for taking the time to spend with us today. It's been really enjoyable. We will have a recording of the event. So I know there were some people that had to leave early or maybe weren't able to make this time. So it will be available on our YouTube channel. And anybody who's registered through the Eventbrite will also receive it in their inbox. And again, don't forget, you can get a copy of Bevin's book on our website. Please be for using the code Bevin25 for the discount, and please be sure to check out Bevin's website as well and all of his wonderful products. I'd also like to thank Brittany Lynn in the background, posting everybody's questions and sharing all of the information and just being a great support in the back there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next event.
Sarah and Brittany, thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So do this, friends. Go to the New Society website, get yourself a copy of the book, and then immediately head outside and enjoy this beautiful Earth Day. Find yourself an herb to work with and sit down and just take a moment to be with the plants for sure. Today's the day for it. Sounds like great advice. I'm going to head out and do that now. I see some dandelions in my backyard, so awesome. I'll leave some for the bees, though. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and take care. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.